You are the media now. That's the message. That's the message of the moment. That's the message of my channel now. That's the message of probably everybody's channel now. We are the media now. We're the purveyors of truth and sentiment. We have an approach that's directed towards the voters, the people, the populace at large. And we're not trying to do things for other media. Donald Trump won the election just this last week. He did it because we're the media. Elon Musk started a trend on his X platform, and it grew like wildfire. The access media, the paid-off pundits, and the three companies that own 99.9% of all media in this country, they're going to have to pivot now to start telling the truth. Just one message will reign in the future, or at least for the next few years. You're the media. And it was all made possible by a bastion of free speech, a person in Elon Musk who spent $44 billion of, well, his and other people's money to purchase an intelligence agency compromised Twitter and turn it into X. And while the dastardly details of the suppression of information and censorship, all of that prevailed under a propaganda machine that was driven by the government boot heel, with support of the creator, Jack Dorsey, Elon Musk sought to remove the mess, restoring as much free speech as he could, everything he could muster, and countering the nonprofits and NGOs that were pushing on advertisers to cause them to, well, stop advertising, which, because of Elon's efforts, they ended up having to fold and disappear, enabling people to recognize the difference between truthful information and government narratives that were spun out by severely captured legacy media, which I think we have all seen over the course of the last, well, 2 decades. Now, citizen journalists movements are spun into action for people such as James O'Keefe, and he suddenly had to leave his captured Veritas efforts behind to reform under OMG, reminding everyone out there that you're the media now. You have YouTubers, Rumble ranters, and even every other platform streamer that's out there know that this phrase is a rallying cry. It's an invitation to participate in a particular kind of citizen journalism that involves just asking questions and reporting facts that are otherwise distorted by other media efforts. You're the media now. That's a good message, because after these results of just the last few days, it's absolutely true. Perhaps the defining quality of this election cycle is how few people trust the mainstream, or legacy media if you prefer. They see their role as an establishment-owned globalist world government apologist with a deteriorating audience that often spends the majority of its time mocking and laughing at them. How much influence did they have in 2024? At least 25% less, if not more. If you base all of that on the viewership on election night coverage alone, if you look at the outcome state by state, they had a negative effect in the extreme. In fact, the well over 90% negative coverage by the mainstream media for 4 consecutive years after Trump left office had a deleterious effect, to be kind about it. It didn't go their way. In fact, looking at it another way, based on Trump and Kamala Harris's appearance on various podcast shows, Kamala's avoidance of anything real not controlled by her and her team with editing approval, such as, well, the Joe Rogan experience, and essentially Trump, J.D. Vance, and even Elon's late race appearance interviews with that very same Joe Rogan, citizen journalism is not the future. It's now, right now. That conversation was so important with the former Bernie bro Joe Rogan that it actually yielded his presidential endorsement. And I don't think you could have made any other choice. Not only has the media landscape shifted, the new media did nothing but demonstrate the shattering destruction of the elite stranglehold on public attention. It's gone. It's over. And to use a sentence they so often parrot, and that's a good thing. People have realized that listening to the honeyed poison poured in their ears by the mainstream is the equivalent of turning a blind eye to the truth. We, the people, have seen the coverage, the statements, the demonization of the majority opinion as a projection of a machine bent on authoritarian government and cult-like adherence to the message. If you stray from their dogma, you are attacked, unpersoned, and will be accused and charged with whatever they can make stick. Worse yet, they have changed public perception to one where a substantial majority do not trust the mainstream at all. In the past, journalism required the author to suppress their biases and pursue actual facts and truth. At this point, there is no pursuit involved, no investigation, no dedication to taking the path wherever it takes you, wherever it goes, even if it destroys your indoctrinated worldview. No, instead, it's pushing your ingrained activism narrative to help conquer your ideological goals. Yet no one in the mainstream will cop to this. While everyone has seen it and are tired of it, they dismiss it. They have replaced it. Who knew? Who knew first? And told the story of FEMA issues after Hurricane Milton. Citizens who exposed issues with Biden's mental decline. Whistleblowers who highlighted the constant lies, corruption, and two-tier justice in the many memory-hold Biden administration, including Hunter Biden laptop. You guessed it, us. We're the media now. So, what was the moment that woke the most people up in the 4 most prevalent years of media lies? Well, the legitimate Democrat candidate in this election's disastrous debate. The media could no longer shirk the truth. They had to actually come clean about Grandpa Ice Cream's deteriorating, melting brain. Something, if anybody that watched myself or Valiant Renegade or Nerdrotic, D-Day Cobra, The Quartering, Tim Pool, Comics Division, and so many more, hundreds of other channels, had been reporting since before the previous election even. We talked openly and often about it in creative ways to avoid words that would irritate YouTube and other platforms and, well, catch the ire of their strict censorship. While that was difficult back then, it's a bit easier now. You see, we can cite authoritative sources, well, what YouTube considers authoritative sources, by repeating what we were saying all those years ago. It's just they have now finally covered it. And consider the fact that so many people were caught off guard. Why? As far as the media had been saying that the administration's chief liar, KJP in particular, all was hunky and dory. President Hair Sniffer was right as rain and sharp as a tack. Well, many of us were shouted down, censored, and shadow banned, like myself specifically, especially the last 3 weeks, for pointing out the obvious contrary. Want to know why the mainstream media didn't say anything? Well, they were afraid to mention his age for fear of being called out as ageist. Literally. That's what they were afraid of. They were afraid of telling the truth for being called a name. Or at least that was one of the lame excuses that they made recently. They could see that the emperor had no clothes, but pretended that he did. All because he aligned with them politically. And it put them in a disastrous position. Of course, many of us, or something that the mainstream media doesn't hide anymore, is the deteriorating health of Mr. Biden. Biden was likely unfit to serve as president from the very start, which, if you think about it now, who was running this country with such disregard for its citizenry for oh so long now? And why wasn't the press pilloried for covering it all up for so very long? Yet, instead of that, the media began to focus on the utterly ridiculous idea of placing an unlikable candidate in the position to run without any primaries, to actually present the person and get them vetted as the greatest thing since no one voted for her before. That's right. If you remember, she did not receive one primary vote in the previous election cycle. Nobody liked her, and certainly no one liked her more now. She was the failed border czar that the media kept lying about that she wasn't, despite the coverage of the fact that they'd even reported that fact. One of the key issues this election was brought into sharp relief because she didn't bother to care what the American people wanted. One of the issues being border security. As the media lost all credibility, something they seem to be doubling down upon to this very moment, the billionaire owners, board members, and CEOs of these companies recognized that in light of their malfeasance and their downright partisanship, they could not endorse such an unqualified, unpleasant, and unpopular candidate. It would make them seem even more disconnected from reality than they have been ever before. Even Jeff Bezos's plaything, the Washington Post, refused to push forward that kind of charade, thus distinguishing itself from the fully compromised entities surrounding them that went forward with such an endorsement. What followed was more performative virtue signaling of ideologically captured writers, editors, columnists, identifying themselves as such while resigning to make a point. Not sure what the point was. We're going to make it easier for people to keep their jobs who didn't leave, because it accomplished nothing aside from knowing who to avoid listening to in the future and getting a bit of exposure to what the regular folks have dealt with financially for the last 4 years. A taste of their own medicine, per se. I mean, it's odd in that moment for them, I'm sure, thinking that anyone would care as they extricated themselves from their paying jobs to look for something elsewhere at a much lower pay rate, which they would certainly be guaranteed. Perhaps virtue signaling can have a cost and even a positive result. I mean, for the people working at Bezos's, as I mentioned, they have a problem. They're increasingly an irrelevant source of information. So it was kind of a boon for everybody left behind because they get to keep their jobs longer, as basically a bunch of layoffs took place without any help from the bosses. I mean, there were some savvy enough in the media to realize that perhaps the jig was up, and there was no real future in the mainstream any longer. Media had failed the masses and became what most first-year journalism students were taught in the 90s to avoid at all costs. The activist ideologue that's putting feelings before the facts and entering a story with an agenda, which is a no-no. I would be lying to say that I haven't been fascinated in the last few days that even network talking heads like Sean Hannity have started preaching that the collapse of the old mainstream media is at hand, recognizing that most people do not trust them, not anymore. Worse yet, as he states, the American people no longer care what the legacy media says, what Hollywood says, what Obama says, what the celebrities have to say. Why? Because they have zero influence. Legacy media and celebrity influence is completely dead, and I couldn't agree more. From a distance, everybody can see that the old media is dying. Even version 1.0 of the new media is toast. Site traffic is plummeting on a trend that seems to accelerate for some reason. Well, the last 2 years alone, it's been driven for a real reason. It's way worse because of the algorithmic change that could be the final straw to break up Google into a dozen pieces or more because, well, they're driving it and pushing things to basically just Google to find every shred of news before you even bother to visit a site. Cable news is in such bad shape that Comcast is looking to break with their long-term effort called MSNBC. Of course, I carefully call PMSNBC, but they, in fact, are looking for a buyer right now. Very publicly, as a matter of fact. They talked about it in their quarterly call. Not that anybody wants that smoldering ruin liability. Worse yet, Warner Brothers Discovery could not even solicit offers for CNN at the meeting of the moguls in Sun Valley this year. That's saying a lot. A lot of billionaires there, and nobody opened their checkbook. Nobody wants it, even less so now. And it's only going to get worse. And why is it all so bad? Well, it's the same answer. Audiences are just done with the typical news and its sources. They prefer the screen in their hand, like maybe the one you're holding now, to the one that would be on the wall, or sometimes a computer screen. They prefer a dynamic and engaging, authentic person talking about the news and the events of the day. A person who relates to them and their situation, authentic in a way that today's media just can't ever manage. After breaking with traditional journalism, the mainstream gave away their only advantage, abandoning the idea of focused, strong ethical practices and strenuous objectivity with facts, anchoring basically everything that they did: stories, columns, opinion pieces, and the like. All of that created a situation that I don't think they were prepared for. It left no difference between the mainstream and somebody's old fashioned 90s blog page. Being focused on only an ideological worldview must be easier to adhere to so very strictly in order to even work in that structure. Seems much easier for everybody working in legacy media's framework, and it also removes their relevance, and as a result, an audience's attention, which I feel like I might be losing yours, so I'm going to hurry through the rest of this. You see, I find that I can go on and on about the ways that the media, the legacy media, has been dropping the ball with facts, figures, and of course, quotes from within. But why bother? I didn't bury the lead for a reason. I led with it. You're the media now, and that's a good thing.